The rain was coming down in sheets as I drove home, the wipers of my old Volvo working overtime. I'm Gareth, a mechanic in Manchester, and at 43 I thought I had life pretty much figured out. Married to my childhood sweetheart Lowri for 20 years, a comfortable home, a steady job the whole 9 yards, or so I thought. Lowri worked as a marketing manager for a local brewery. She was always the ambitious one, the go-getter, while I was content tinkering with engines and getting my hands dirty. It was a balance that worked for us, or at least it always had. Lately, though, things felt different. Lowri was distant, often working late, and when she was home, she seemed preoccupied, her mind miles away. I chalked it up to stress at work, a new project, something temporary. I was wrong, so wrong. First sign, the tiny crack in our seemingly perfect facade, came in the form of a misplaced receipt. I was tidying up the living room one Saturday morning when I found it tucked between the cushions of the sofa. A receipt from a fancy restaurant in the city center, the Gilded Spoon. It was dated a week prior, a Tuesday night, and the amount was substantial enough for two people to have a lavish meal. Now Lowri and I rarely went out for dinner, especially not to places like the Gilded Spoon. We preferred cozy pubs or the occasional Italian bistro, and if she had gone out with friends, she would have mentioned it. So the receipt sat there in my hand, a silent accusation, a seed of doubt planted in my mind. Lowri, love, what's this? I asked when she came downstairs, trying to keep my tone casual. She glanced at the receipt, her eyes widening slightly before she composed herself. Oh, that was a business dinner. I had to take a client out. A client, on a Tuesday night. And you didn't mention it, it was last minute, Gareth. Honestly, it was so boring. We just talked about spreadsheets and marketing strategies. I didn't want to bore you with the details. Her explanation sounded plausible, but something felt off. The way she avoided my gaze, the slight hesitation in her voice, it all added up to a nagging feeling of unease. I let it go, telling myself I was being paranoid. But the seed of doubt had been planted and it began to grow. I started paying closer attention to Lowri's behavior, noticing the little things I had previously overlooked. The secretive phone calls she took in the garden, the way she flinched when I touched her, the constant excuses for working late. One evening, while Lowri was supposedly at a networking event, I decided to surprise her at her office. I knew she wouldn't be expecting me, and I thought it would be a nice gesture. Big mistake. When I arrived at the brewery, the lights were off and the building was deserted. I called Lowri's mobile, but it went straight to voicemail. My heart began to pound in my chest. Where was she? If she wasn't at her office, where could she be? The receipt from the Gilded Spoon flashed in my mind, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Lowri arrived home around 11, looking flushed and flustered. Sorry I'm late, she said, avoiding my eyes. The networking event went on longer than expected, really, because I went to your office, Lowri. It was deserted. Her face paled. What? Why would you do that? I wanted to surprise you, but I guess the surprise is on me, isn't it? I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice any longer. Where were you, Lowri? Who were you with? She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room. I was with a friend, she stammered. We went for a drink. A friend? What friend? Someone I know, no, she said quickly. Just someone from work. You wouldn't know him. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. So you were with a man on a Tuesday night at a fancy restaurant, and tonight at some mysterious networking event that doesn't exist. Lowri burst into tears. Gareth, please don't do this. You're twisting things, am I? Or am I finally seeing things clearly? I felt a cold fury rising within me, a rage I had never experienced before. Tell me the truth, Lowri. Please, just tell me the truth. She broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. Okay, you're right, there is someone else. The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, my legs feeling weak. Who is it? It's Rhys, from work. Rhys. I knew Rhys. He was one of the junior marketing executives, a slick, arrogant young man with a reputation for being a womanizer. I had met him a few times at company events, and I had always disliked him. The thought of Lowri with him, of them, it made my stomach churn. How long? I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. A few months, she admitted, her eyes filled with shame. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to happen. Mean for it to happen, I repeated, incredulous. You didn't mean to betray me. You didn't mean to lie to me. "You didn't mean to destroy our marriage." She didn't answer, just continued to cry. I turned and walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I needed to get away, to clear my head, to try to make sense of what had just happened. I drove aimlessly for hours, the rain still pouring down, mirroring the storm raging inside me. I ended up at a small pub on the outskirts of town, a place I used to frequent in my younger days. I sat alone in a corner booth, nursing a pint of beer and trying to process the enormity of Lowri's betrayal. How could she do this to me? After all these years, after all we had been through together. I had always been loyal to her, always put her first. And this was how she repaid me, with lies, deceit, and infidelity. As the night wore on, my anger began to give way to a deep, gnawing sadness. I thought about our life together, the good times we had shared, the dreams we had made. All of it now tainted, poisoned by Lowri's betrayal. I knew I couldn't stay with her. I couldn't forgive her. The trust was broken, shattered beyond repair. But what was I going to do? Where was I going to go? I had built my whole life around Lowri, around our marriage. Now everything was crumbling around me. The next morning I returned home to find Lowri waiting for me, her eyes red and swollen. "Gareth, please let me explain," she pleaded. "There's nothing to explain, Lowri," I said coldly. "It's over. I want a divorce." She started to cry again, begging me to reconsider, promising to end things with Rhys. But I was adamant. I couldn't trust her anymore. I couldn't look at her without seeing the lies in her eyes. The divorce was messy and painful. We had to divide our assets, sell our house, and disentangle our lives after 2 decades together. It was like ripping a part of myself, tearing away a piece of my soul. I moved into a small flat above my garage, surrounded by the tools of my trade. It was a far cry from the comfortable home I had shared with Lowri, but it was my own space, a sanctuary from the pain and betrayal. I threw myself into my work, fixing cars, rebuilding engines, anything to keep my mind occupied. But at night, when I was alone in my flat, the memories would come flooding back and the pain would be almost unbearable. One day, a few months after the divorce was finalized, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, wondering who it could be. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Gareth, it's Gwyneth, Rhys's wife." Gwyneth. I remembered her vaguely from company events. She was a quiet, unassuming woman, always overshadowed by her husband's flashy personality. "Gwyneth, what do you want?" I know about Lowri," she said hesitantly. "Rhys told me everything." My heart sank. "I'm sorry," I said, not knowing what else to say. "I'm sorry too," she replied. "He's done this before, you know. He's had affairs with other women at work. I wanted you to know that you're not alone." We talked for a long time that day, sharing our stories of betrayal and heartbreak. I learned that Rhys had been manipulating Lowri for months, preying on her insecurities and vulnerabilities. He had promised her a promotion, a better life, all lies to get her into bed. Gwyneth and I became unlikely allies, 2 victims of the same man's deceit. We met for coffee, shared our experiences, and offered each other support. We found solace in our shared pain, a connection forged in the fires of betrayal. One evening, Gwyneth called me, her voice trembling. "I found something," she said. "Something you need to see." I drove to her house, my heart pounding with anticipation. She led me to her computer and showed me a series of emails Rhys had sent to Lowri, detailing a plan to embezzle funds from the brewery. He had been using Lowri to gain access to sensitive financial information, planning to siphon off money for his own personal gain. I was stunned. Lowri wasn't just a victim of infidelity. She was a pawn in Rhys's criminal scheme. I felt a surge of anger, not just at Rhys, but at Lowri as well. How could she be so naive, so easily manipulated? We decided to take the evidence to the police. Rhys was arrested and charged with fraud and embezzlement. Lowri was also questioned, but she claimed she had no knowledge of Rhys's criminal activities. The police believed her, but her reputation was ruined. She was fired from her job and ostracized by her friends and colleagues. Rhys was sentenced to several years in prison. Gwyneth divorced him and moved away, seeking a fresh start. Lowri was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, alone and disgraced. As for me, I continued to work at my garage, rebuilding my life one day at a time. The pain of Lowri's betrayal never completely went away, but it faded over time. I learned to trust again, to open my heart to the possibility of love. One sunny afternoon, a few years after the divorce, I was working on a vintage sports car when a familiar figure walked into my garage. It was Gwyneth. "Hello, Gareth," she said, smiling shyly. "I was in the area and I thought I'd stop by, Gwyneth. It's good to see you," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "What brings you to Manchester?" "I moved back," she said. "I missed the city. And I missed you." We started dating, cautiously at first, both of us still scarred by our past experiences. But we found comfort and understanding in each other's company. We had both been through hell and we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Eventually, we fell in love. It wasn't the passionate, all-consuming love I had felt with Lowri, but it was a deep, steady love, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. We married in a small ceremony, surrounded by our friends and family. Looking back on my life, I realized that Lowri's betrayal, as painful as it was, ultimately led me to where I am today. It forced me to reevaluate my priorities, to discover my own strength and resilience, and to find love again in the most unexpected of places. Sometimes, the greatest betrayals can lead to the greatest blessings. You just have to be willing to open your heart to the possibility of a new beginning.